Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. And my first picture here is about fun. I'd like to talk about fun. I'd like to begin by talking to you as a dad. I have 3 kids, 3 young adult kids, and they've been through this phase where inevitably, almost inevitably, alcohol is involved. And it is a great way to have fun. You have people who can laugh. You have the feel-good relaxation of alcohol, especially if life's not treating you too well. You have acceptance at the very age when you want to be accepted, where what you say people laugh at. And of course you have the capacity for war stories. Together, get into a bit of mischief. Hey, remember that day we got kicked off the bus when Anne-Marie vomited down the bus driver's shirt? These are the war stories that will live on forever at every single school reunion. And as a father, I wanted my kids to have fun. You can't live in cotton wool. And as a father, I worried. But I worry more now as a doctor about something else. And I want to talk to you about this thing. This is what we call the thin red line. It's the thin red line between fun and catastrophe. So let's just think about what that is. And you only have to pick up the morning newspaper to be reminded about what I'm talking about. Let me just pick a few examples. Here's Marianne, and she wakes up in the morning next to some guy she can only vaguely remember, friend of one of her friends. And she's not sure, she certainly had a lot to drink and she's not sure if it was that or maybe she was date raped, but she is waking up somewhere where she didn't mean to be. And she knows a few things. Firstly, she's at risk of sexually transmitted disease. No condoms used here. She's also at risk of being pregnant. She's not on the pill. She didn't anticipate this. She hadn't planned for this sort of thing to happen. She knows too there may be social media already. Someone might have taken photographs, his friends, her friends, it may already be out there. But she knows for sure one thing, and that is that she feels ashamed because she didn't plan for it to be that way. She got to this thin red line between fun and catastrophe, and somehow she crossed it. And let's look at another situation. Here's Mark. He's also been at the party, he's had a bit to drink, and someone offered him some speed. He had some of that too. 1/3 of all alcohol-fueled violence involves methamphetamine as well. And someone gives a bit of cheek and he finds himself hitting him. He hits the guy and he notices the guy goes down straight away. And then as the guy hits the ground, there's a sickening crack as that boy's head hits the pavement. And even in his inebriated state, he knows that that's not a good sign. What happens, of course, is that this guy ends up in hospital and sees someone like me as a doctor. And it's not that long ago I had to stand with a guy like that who was king hit, and with his parents and his brother as they discussed turning the ventilator off. But sometimes they live in a slightly vegetative state and dribbling all day and uncommunicative. But it's not just this person who suffers, so does this guy, because of course he's been in jail for assault and possibly, if that ventilator gets turned off, for manslaughter at least. They both crossed this thin red line between fun and catastrophe. It is a big worry in society. It'll be a worry for you, and I can tell you it'll be a worry for your parents. There are wonderful things that they're trying, mostly to do with legislation, police, what the school teaches you, advertising about alcohol, etc. But pretty much it depends on these people. And there is the most powerful force, which I have not mentioned yet. It is acknowledged as the most powerful force to prevent these problems. It is acknowledged as the most powerful untapped force to prevent these problems. And I speak to you now, I guess, not as dad, not necessarily as a doctor, but as the director of the Fathering Project at the University of Western Australia. But in order for you to understand this, I'm going to take you on a bit of a trip. a trip that might surprise you. This is K2. K2 is the second highest mountain in the world. It's in Pakistan, 8,600 metres. It's called the king of the mountains because although it's only the second highest, for mountaineers it is a lot harder to climb. And therefore it's their pinnacle achievement to have climbed K2. It's also called the Savage Mountain because storms just come across that mountain at high velocity and the death rate is high, much higher than Everest. I want to take you up here on this journey to a nice serac overhanging up here, a place called the Bottleneck. 8,200 metres in the death zone. And let me introduce you to a couple of our travellers who are going to help us think through this. First of all, here's some mountaineers. Here's Sir Edmund Hillary, famous mountaineer, first up Mount Everest, and one of his Sherpa friends. But it's not them we're talking about, it's Sir Edmund's son Peter. Peter himself, a famous mountaineer, twice up Mount Everest, first father-son combination to do it. And he, in this story, is at that point on Mount K2, at the Bottleneck. One of his fellow climbers at the time, Alison Hargrave, she's a British mountaineer, also very talented, these are two kids. She's also with Peter and 7 others on the mountain. And at the Bottleneck, she and 6 climbers were above Peter, and his friend was coming up behind him. But he felt, when he looked down, that he thought a storm might be brewing. But the people above him, including Alison, said, no, we're going to go up. It's no problem, we're going up. She said, use the red rope. And he thought again, and then his friend came up and joined him, and he said, look, I'm not sure about this weather. I'm not sure about it. This is a dangerous mountain. And his friend said, no, I'm sure it's fine. And he went up. And Peter, here's the point, heard the voice of his father, Sir Edmund, in his head. And it said, Peter, make your own mind up. Peter looked up there. I spoke to him last week about this. He looked up there to get to the summit of K2, and everyone else was going, and he thought, if I retreat now, 7 people are going to get to the summit, I'm going to be back there in my tent, I'm going to look like a total goose, and I'm going to miss out. His father's voice again said to him, make your own mind up. So he decided to retreat, just didn't think it looked safe. So he retreated back down here, despite what you would call enormous peer pressure. And it's interesting that he heard his father's voice because he's hypoxic, he's cold, he's hungry, he's tired, he's thirsty. And at that altitude you don't think straight, but still his father's voice came to him. It came to him because his father had spent a lot of time with him in mountains and therefore had imprinted in him some values in life. So what happened? Peter did retreat down the mountain. He decided to retreat. As he went down the mountain, a storm hit. In fact, he nearly got blown off the mountain. Again, his father's voice spoke to him. Fear is good. Fear will keep you safe. Stay calm. Got back to his tent at Camp 4, exhausted, in his sleeping bag, slept, woke up, beautiful blue sky. And above him, all 7 climbers, including the mother of 2, Alison, were dead. So, but for him listening to his father's voice, at the moment that he got to that thin red line between fun and adventure and catastrophe, the fact that he listened to his father's voice saved his life. I thought this is uncannily similar to the situation our young people face when they get to that thin red line. What is it that causes young people to cross the line? What is it that causes them to turn back? Well, it is a father has a tremendous capacity to do that. And obviously fathers are not doing that or it wouldn't be happening. Statistically, that is the case. Now, of course, mothers are important. But mothers are doing their best. And kids whose fathers don't bother are much more at risk of crossing that red line. So we, knowing this, and worried about the future of our people, set up at the University of Western Australia the Fathering Project. This is a not-for-profit, research, evidence-based, like I said, university-based project. Its goal is to help dads realise what they can do, how they can speak into a child's life. Our goal is that every child in Australia would have a powerful and appropriate father figure in their lives. But you might say, isn't that a bit of modern hokery-pokery? I mean, this new fathering project, why do you need it? Surely human beings have been around for thousands of years, so didn't have a fathering project then. That is exactly right, but that is the problem, that the way human beings have lived for thousands of years has been okay. It's only now that we face these enormous risks. In fact, it's only now that the world is so dangerous for young people. Let me give you some examples. This is a graph from 1800, 1900, 2000. Everybody will agree that kids' needs and their risks have increased, even increased certainly from when I was a kid. Let me pick some examples. Drugs and binge drinking. I'm not even sure we had drugs around when I was a kid, and it was very hard to get alcohol. Depression, teenage suicide, cyberbullying, the obesity epidemic in young people, addiction to pornography as teenagers. These are all things which are new. So kids' needs have increased. But okay, if dads are that important, what's the problem? This is the problem. That the father's performance, the father's capacity to respond to those needs has declined. I'm guessing people in this room have sensed that. What do I mean by that? Dads are spending more time at work, on average 20 hours a week, more than they did in previous decades. There's more separation, divorce, much more. 26% of children in this state go to sleep at night without one of their parents in the house, usually not their dad. And of course there's less help a father has less help from his own dad. Kids don't tend to have their grandparents around. Back here, people lived in family structures, villages, caves, whatever. But now people tend to live a long way from their extended family, so the dad doesn't have the usual other males to help him. So he's doing it alone. And then because his dad wasn't much good, he doesn't know how to be a dad. So just at the very time when kids' needs are increasing, dad's ability to help has declined, and that's why we set up the Fathering Project. And it's been incredibly effective. But let me just give you one statistic. I know statistics bore people, so I'm now going to summarise about 600 papers and books in one statistic. And it's a powerful one, I think. If this gap was closed and every child had a strong and appropriate father figure in their life, there would be at least a 50% reduction in those problems. I mean, nothing else in society is that powerful. This is the predicted reduction. For some of them, it's more. So you can see why it's said that this is the most powerful untapped force to stop young people crossing that thin red line. So let me just give you a few ideas of what the Fathering Project teaches dads. We teach dads about taking kids out on dad dates, starting from when they're young. And when you go, we always say, look, go via Bunnings and get a tube of super glue and zip up your lips so you can listen properly. Because the hardest thing for dads is listening. Ask the kids about their music, their friends. How's life going? Don't preach at them. When dads do this, it is a spectacular success. And we say if you've got 10 kids, that's 10 separate dad dates. It's always one-on-one. We encourage them to get out and do things physically with their kids. Don't just say to the kids, get out and exercise. Be there with them. Father-son, father-daughter camping trips. In fact, the Fathering Project arranges father-child sleepovers, camping sleepouts at schools. And these are also great. And the other thing of many that we suggest is father-child one-on-one trips where you take the child with you on a trip, maybe a work trip or maybe just a footy trip or an invented trip. Now, having looked at this, I've seen it's a plane. It doesn't have to be on a plane. It can be in a ute going to the next town, but it's got to be one-on-one. And this is like waving a magic wand. And maybe I'll just tell you a story so you understand what I'm getting at. A guy came running up to me. He said to me, Bruce, I've been dying to see you because I've read the chapter about taking kids on work trips. He said, I was going to Paris for 5 days for work and my 14-year-old daughter and I were just not getting on. So I read that and I thought, oh, well, I'll take her on this trip. So I said, you want to come on this work trip with me? And she sort of thinks, yeah, do I have to go with him, you know? And she thinks, oh, Paris, yeah, okay, righto. Again, I emphasise it doesn't have to be Paris. I don't know how many times I've said that. It doesn't have to be Paris. Anyway, 5 days conference and then 9 days together. And he said, you know what happened? He said, she keeps telling people that they're the best 2 weeks of her life. And he said, she and I are like this now. It was like a miracle. And, you know, you think about it. Why does that work? Hundreds of people have tried this. It works. Why does that work? I've done it with my kids. I've got to say that I was reluctant to do it. We did it when my oldest son was 9 and I was so reluctant. I thought, this is going to be a nightmare. But it was. I actually went for a whole month. It was absolutely wonderful. And my son, now, sort of 20 years later, remembers every single moment. And I think, what is it? Why is it like waving a magic wand? Well, let's just go back to our little situation here. What is it that about one of those kids' relationship with their dad would do to them what it did for Peter Hillary and stop them crossing that thin red line between fun, adventure and catastrophe? Let's just say it's this girl here. There are two things. It says to the child, I'm okay. I'm already okay, I'm special. Or another word is worthwhile. It makes a child feel worthwhile. It's what we call the big W, worthwhile. When I was a kid, I got vaccinated against polio. And I've never had polio and I don't live in an iron lung. If I had to pick the one vaccine that was going to protect the kids against these catastrophes, it would be to feel worthwhile. I don't need it. Guys, I'll pass. I don't need it. Look, thanks. I'll just drink water. I don't need it. Look, guys, no criticism of what you're doing, but I'll give it a miss. I might just go home now. I've got to work tomorrow. Whatever. To feel worthwhile. I don't need it. So that's, I think, what that sort of trip and those dad dates and time does. And I don't know, but I bet that guy's 14-year-old daughter, her risks of crossing that line would have plummeted because of that trip and the ongoing relationship. And I say that because of statistics. It's a very powerful force when present and a very powerful negative when it's missing. That's one thing. And the other thing is, in a group like this, peer pressure is enormous. And having a dad or a father figure, if dad's not around, it helps kids to make up their own mind. I will choose, like Peter Hillary, to make my own mind up. His dad said, mate, make your own mind up. It was incredibly strong peer pressure up there. Make up your own mind. And I've noticed that dads who teach their kids how to manage peer pressure, the kids are much better equipped to do it, to make up their own mind. In our research, we found that 90% of dads do not talk to their teenagers about how to manage peer pressure. It's a very important thing. And honestly, it's not that hard if you give kids the right skills. That's why it's such a powerful, largely untapped force to stop kids from crossing this thin red line from fun to catastrophe and ending up in the hospital where I would sadly have to see them. So for the young people in the room, I encourage you to think about these things. In particular, listen to the voices in your head, the strong voices that will keep you from crossing that thin red line. It is a thin red line. It is a very narrow, thin red line between fun and catastrophe. Trust me, I've seen it. It's very thin. But we want our kids to have fun. And I'll just say something maybe to the camera, the mothers out there who might be watching this. I mean, mums, this is no criticism of mums. It's just that mums are usually continually doing a good job, soldiering on, and often, frankly, doing it solo, doing most of the parenting, getting frustrated that dad isn't pulling his weight. And you know, we thank you for loving the kids so much that you worry about them. And you can help by encouraging men to get connected to the Fathering Project. Just Google the Fathering Project, and we've got lots of tips on how to do this. Weekly reminders and books and videos. But I guess my final comment would be, again, to any dads who are watching this, you need to, I mean, I know you love your kids. You just need to think, you need to realise how important you are. You are powerfully important. Most dads don't realise how important they are. But then when they do, all they do is feel guilty. It's not that hard to do these things. The Fathering Project gives tips, road-tested tips that work, and it's pretty easy, and honestly, it's a lot of fun. Turns out, it's a lot of fun, and they really work. And you can't say, I give in, I'm not going to do it, because there's no one else. The person responsible, that's you, the father, is letting the kids down if you're missing in action. So there is really, I think, no choice on this. It's a powerful force for society. If you want to protect your kids from crossing that thin red line, get involved in their lives. And if you don't, you'll put them at risk. And once they've crossed that line into catastrophe, sometimes it is so catastrophic that it's just too late. So I would encourage you to think about it. Thank you.